Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where we discuss the challenges of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that even means. I'm Kane, and joining me this evening is Matthew. How are you, mate?
I'm pretty good, Kane. A bit tired. Went for a run this evening, but yeah, apart from that, the gin is going down nicely after that run.
Do a hardcore 15K run you were saying before we kicked off, and then how much gin is that? A glass, a bottle? How much to replenish the fuel of a 15K run?
I did have a hydrolyte before my gin, but I am just started my first glass, so there might be a few more after this.
You should do it the old Snoop Dogg style. I think it's gin and juice, isn't it? Gin and juice, the old Snoop. Yeah. Anyway, old R&B song, gin and juice. Yeah,
gin and juice. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. So, how's the marathon training going?
Good. Yeah, I was calculating. I've done 40 Ks this week, so I think I'm on track. I've got to do actual plans, so that's what I'll be doing tonight after the podcast. I'll do a bit of an Excel spreadsheet and a goal plan for the next 20 or so weeks until it is. And but no, I think I'm okay. I'm a bit sore after each run at the moment, but I assume that'll just get better with more Ks that get into the legs.
What would you usually run? Because you do run a bit. What would your normal sort of run be kilometre wise?
Yeah, probably maybe only 5 to 10, maybe once a week, twice at a push. But yeah, so this is a whole new sort of ball game for me, backing up every couple of days.
Yeah, 15 Ks every couple of days. I'd imagine that'd be pretty heavy-legged by the end of a week.
It is, yeah. I will probably be crying later tonight. But I did buy some compression socks today, and they seem to be helping a little bit. So see where you go.
I'm an advocate of compression socks. I just wear them after I've been standing at work all day, some days. So yeah, even if it's not even physical activity, just wearing them when I'm standing up, I just feel my legs aren't anywhere near as sort of heavy at the end of the day, and just sort of, but they seem to help with circulation.
Yeah, I used to have a pair, and I can only find one. So I thought, oh shit, I better buy a new pair. But the chap at the 2XU, 2 times U, however you say that, did say that you've bought recovery socks. Do not wear them while you're running. And I got home and I thought, well, what the hell's the difference?
Yeah, no, I think it's, there is obviously science behind it. I'm an advocate. I've got mine off Amazon a couple of times. So I bought my dad a pair a couple of weeks ago because he's still getting up and down ladders. He's saying he was cramping a lot. So I bought him some electrolytes and some compression socks. So I don't know if they've helped his cramps yet, but I did all I could.
He'll be very stylish on the work site.
Oh no, there's no way he'd wear them on the work site. They're purely for home. So I'm not sure you could just sort of walk in with your your stubby shorts and your compression socks on. You might be laughed off the work site. He's a bit old school.
Yeah, I think he might be.
Mate, what are we going to talk about tonight? You got a great topic. I think it's a really important topic for men out there, especially new dads.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have a chat about something that's got brought to my attention, the transition between or from being a husband to becoming a father, and what sort of is involved with that, I guess. And it's always going to be different for everybody. But in this case,
now, is this because you're having a fourth kid?
No, definitely not having a fourth kid. No, this is
no. We know I know what the reason is, but I think it's a really important topic, that transition between being a husband, or even being not a husband, being just in a relationship with somebody, to then having a newborn. I say thrust upon you because as much as you can plan for these sort of things, you can't plan for these sort of things. There's always surprises. You never know how you're going to feel when you have a kid.
No, that's right. And I guess maybe one of the things we can talk about tonight is, well, all the different sort of factors around that. But I guess we'll kick off with do you think that the time sort of period between becoming a husband to becoming a father has anything to do with it? So say if you're a husband for maybe a year versus if you're a husband for 3 or 4 years, you're in a more of a stable pattern, I guess, and then you sort of have a child and everything gets turned around, as opposed to it happening more quickly. Is that a factor, perhaps?
To me, I don't think it's probably not so much, because a lot of people live with their partner before they get married. It's not the 1920s anymore, where first time you sleep with your partner or live with your partners after the night you get married. So I think most people have kind of maybe lived with their partner for enough time that you kind of steady with that routine. But it's just that it is just having a kid is just a completely different situation. And we're actually looking at photos of our little fella tonight when he was a baby, because his prep teacher had asked for a photo from when he was a baby, because they're doing something this week in prep about, the birthdays, which were in January. So we're looking back there and we're looking at photos of, myself and my wife. I'm just going, this is only 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, we look completely different. Like like we've aged terribly in the last 6 years, or 5 or 6 years since the photo was taken. So you just don't know. I don't think it makes no difference how long you've been married for, how long you've been in a relationship and living together. So you kind of get into that sort of flow. But yeah, that marriage piece maybe not so important in my opinion. But what do you think?
No, it's a good point, because I think back to our situation, and look, we got married in 2011 and we had Mia in the June of 2012. So that was, maybe 15 months that we were sort of husband and wife before Mia came along. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I'd been with Kim for 5 or 6 years before that, so it probably doesn't matter too much. But I do just remember everything did change. And looking back now, for the first one is obviously that's where the massive change is. The second and third one, not so much, because you know what to expect, but everything changes in terms of, and I think the biggest one was the sleep factor around the newborn part. And once you can jump that hurdle, it's not so bad. But I really think the big thing is sort of knowing and asking for help, perhaps, if you're struggling a little bit. So not internalizing any issues you have, but communicating was a big thing I found. Maybe I didn't do so well in the first, but by the second and third, it was just, it was just hand in hand.
I think the thing, as a guy, you feel useless. You actually feel useless as a new dad, because you can't actually do anything for the kid. You can't really feed the kid. Like I could feed our little fella after a few weeks because he was mixed fed, but I guess a lot of kids aren't in that sort of boat. They are, breastfed by and large from day one to whenever that stops, 6-9 months down the track. But for that period of time, you kind of feel useless. All you can maybe do is change a nappy and kind of give your partner a hand. You can't really, I say, do anything. You can't. You almost feel helpless because you can't really help that much.
You're right. And that 2 weeks where potentially, or I guess most dads, or back when I was having time off with Mia when she was first born, the 2 weeks there, you really get a waiter with when the bell rings, you come and help out, because like you said, you can't do anything. All you can do is make sure your partner is comfortable and everything's going smoothly there. You can't feed unless they're bottle feeding. So there's really not much you can do, and you do feel useless. And that, I guess, that's a bit, you're going from someone, or perhaps you're working full time in a role that you're useful, to something that you're useless at being. So again, that sort of part is taken away from you, and is really a bit demoralizing.
Yeah, and then after your traditional sort of 2 weeks finishes, you go back to work, and then you feel guilty for going back to work and leaving your partner at home to sort of, raise, like even this period where even they're essentially anyone who can kind of do anything anyway, but you feel guilty not being there to help them because it's bloody hard having a new kid. So it's like you have that helplessness, and then that morphs into guilt, so like some level of guilt. Also relief that you've kind of escaped the screaming baby for 8 hours a day, but there's an implied guilt in that as well. So it's hard as it's really hard as a new father. It's something which is probably not spoken about enough.
No. So whilst there is that, absolute joy and fantastic time that you've got this newborn, there is that other side that perhaps isn't talked about enough, perhaps. So, we talk about, I guess, beyond blue and that kind of depression in guys and stuff, but I don't know, maybe this is a sort of like a little pocket of, being a male, or especially being a father, that, maybe needs to be talked about a little bit more.
I think we all go through it, but it's not something which you talk to somebody about. I never spoke to anybody about it, and he's kind of like, well, there's days where it's just really hard, especially on the back of sleep deprivation, like you're saying before. Like if you haven't slept well for 3 months, and he's sort of 3 months in, sleep's still really hard, then you layer that on top of either feeling of guilt or feeling helpless or useless, which you feel both of those. It can kind of compound and build and build and build. You sort of need to release it somehow.
I guess the good thing these days as well, Kane, is that there's so much information available. I mean, if talking to someone isn't your thing, then that's okay. There's so much out there in Google land, and apps and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And even, I saw a truck go past today. It was Legendary Daddy. So obviously a dad has started up his own sort of business to sort of encourage other dads to get out and about and do stuff. And I haven't looked into it yet, but I will after this podcast just to see what it is. But I thought, there you go. There's someone who's trying to make a bit of a difference and help out and give some support. So support is out there. If communicating with someone else isn't your thing, there's always other avenues.
Yeah, and eventually those, I think those they can pass. Those feelings can pass at a certain period of time when the kid's a bit more interactive and you can do more stuff. Like, I don't know. I tended to think around 6 months things got a little bit easier. The kid was a bit more interactive. They could kind of roll. They recognised you. they recognised that you're actually a person who lived in that house as well. Like it was. I think that if you can get through that first 6 months period, it just changes a little bit where you can be a bit more. You can be a bit more involved. The kid's a little bit more responsive, and you can kind of, I say, play with the kid and take some of that the heat out of I guess the traditional sort of motherly role of them doing most of the stuff because they're doing all the feeding and stuff because they can. Yeah.
And like most things in life, when you get to a point in time where something sort of flips or changes, you forget about what you've gone through in the trenches to get to this point, because everything from that point on is so much more happier and, like you said, interactive, and they're smiling and laughing and all that kind of stuff. Everything else just sort of gets forgotten. And I mean, but it's hard to, while you're in that stage, it's hard to hear that from other people, I guess, because you just think, shit, when's this going to end? But it does end.
Yeah, and eventually at some point, you'll be the favorite parent. Like it's not going to be mum all the time. At some point, dad will be the favorite, and mum will be, I don't like you, mum. So it'll turn. So at some point in the kids formative years, you'll be the favorite. So just wait it out till then and make the most of that time. Just reinforce it. Take them to get ice cream and just do crazy stuff that your partner never would.
And if you've got girls, then at some point you won't be the favorite as well. Just put it out there.
Would it flip for you around 6 months? Like, and did it differ first kid to second and third? When you got to your second and third kid, did you kind of know what to expect?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was probably that 6 month stage because Mia was, like you said, she would tickle her and she was laughing and just so much more responsive to anything you did, hide and seek and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so it was about the 6 month stage for her. And with the second and third, yeah, absolutely. You knew what to expect, especially the sleep deprivation. Knowing that and how bad that is, preparing yourself for what's coming, it's not as bad because you sort of, I was staying up late and making sure I was ready for it, and it just wasn't as bad as the first time. So I don't know. I think you remember the first time being a lot worse than what it was, perhaps. But yeah, second and third was a breeze.
Yeah. And again, this sleep deprivation is something which is not really spoken about either. It affects both, both parents. Like it probably does affect, I guess, the mothers more if they're doing a lot of the feeding through the night. But the sleep deprivation is real, and you can kind of warp reality as well. Like it's almost like you're kind of walking around as a zombie or in a daze. So you can kind of overthink some things because you're sleep deprived as opposed to what's really going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I found that as well with the second and third, with the sleep deprivation, even though I knew what to expect, having that, I guess, and with our third kid, Sam, I was fortunate enough to have a period of 6 months off. So I only worked 3 days for the first 3 months and then 2 days for the second 3 months. So I had a massive amount of time there from when he was born. And the sleep deprivation sort of molded into me feeling a little bit, like you said at the start, they're just useless, because I was sitting there with a 2-month-old who just lays on a mat, doesn't do anything. And I'm just looking at the clock thinking, okay, just counting down time and until, Kim got home from work or whatever she was doing. And it's that, I guess, it creeps in as well. When you sleep deprived, you start having some funny thoughts, but
yeah. I was going to say, so you've had that situation where your first kid was more of a 2-week sort of period where you're off work, and then you've had the 6 month period. It sounds like, the challenges were different, but both were a challenge. That first 2 weeks, it was hard, but then you go back to work, and then it was maybe that guilt thing where the second one was, maybe that feeling of, I don't know what to do for that sort of 6 month period until they start interacting where it becomes more real.
Yeah, spot on. Because the first time you don't know what to expect, then you just get thrown into it, and it's a crazy time. And the third one, you know what to expect, but having that prolonged period where you're at home, but normally, you know, you're working 9 to 5 in an office and you're busy, to going there just sitting on a couch waiting for a baby to be hungry or needing to be fed, or, you know, and you've got to sit there with the baby. I'm not saying you can go off and do your own, mow the lawns or something like that, because it's, and in reality, this is your job. So your job is to focus on this child, and, you know, that's just the role you're playing. But it does sort of tweak, like, you don't sort of think about that. You think about, you know, what am I doing with my time? But you're not realizing that, well, you're raising a child. So if you can sort of, you know, realize what you're doing is probably the most important job in the world, looking after a baby.
Yeah. And we're highlighting something like how we felt when we went through these sort of things. But those first 2 or 3 days when you've just had a new baby, they're probably they are the best times of your life. Like the amount of love which gets sort of thrown your way from, you know, friends, family, people you haven't seen for years, just wishing you well and that sort of thing. That's an amazing period of time. Then reality sets in. But those first 2 or 3 days they're unreal. They're the best day, probably the best days of your life. Absolutely.
And I'm not saying, you know, it was all bad while I was looking after Sam for 6 months, because it did turn, like we said, and it became interactive. And then, you know, I was counting my blessings that I had this opportunity to spend so much time with him and raise him, because I understand not everybody, you know, is able to do that. And it was just the best time, being able to spend, you know, that 6 months watching him grow.
Now, across any of the 3 kids, was there any time where you felt like you needed some time with another guy? Like obviously spending time with the kids and then just, you know, being a new dad, where there's sometimes just like, I just need to get the hell out of here for a night, have, you know, 15 beers, have a hangover tomorrow. And then like, I feel that I've done something for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Kim was great, because she understood that after, you know, having 2 other kids, that both of us needed a bit of a chop out. So she'd catch up with her friends, or I'd go and catch up with my friends. And then just to sort of escape the current reality for a little bit, and then come back to it. But yeah, and we made a point to sort of book that in on a regular basis, not every week, but, you know, maybe once a month, just to go out and do some stuff. And it's also important as well that you don't forget the other kids as well, because it's quite easy to sort of not forget that they're there, but you're spending much more of your attention on this third child, and the other 2 are sort of, you know, pushed to the back a little bit. So making sure you have sort of days with them where you take just them out was also important as well.
Yeah, as well as taking yourself out. I think that's a really important thing for, you know, both parents, like the, you know, mum and dad, or, you know, whatever. If it's mum and mum, dad and dad, mum and dad, whoever, like whatever your relationship sort of status is, I think it's really important to be able to take that time to have, you know, me time, that sort of self-love time, or, you know, whatever you want to call that. So you can get out, connect with friends, go and talk to somebody, have lunch with somebody, even if you're just talking about stuff which is completely unrelated to kids. Because I think that's sometimes the best thing you can do, is just go out and talk about, you know, I want to go out and talk about football, or I want to go out and talk about cricket or something like that, and just talk to somebody about something which is not what's going on at home. Sometimes it's just that escapism.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure, if you're a new parent and you're finding that this is a little bit overwhelming, that's probably a great tip. Go and make sure that you do something that you did before you had the baby, just so it sort of brings you back down.
I think that's really good advice. I think it's a really good place to wrap up this week as well. We've touched on a lot of things tonight around different ways to cope with being a new dad, and there's no right way, there's no wrong way. As Matty mentioned, there's lots of resources out there that you can look up. If you need formal help, lots of those out there as well. So, but most importantly, just kind of do what's best for you and your family. Remember to subscribe to Dad Eats Last on iTunes if you haven't already. And while you're there, please leave a review. Also tell your mates about the podcast, especially if they're guys. Most of all, thanks for listening. And we'll be back next week for another episode, or should I say serving, of Dad Eats Last. How's that for a dad joke? Catch you next week.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.